Senator, thanks for joining us. Always nice to see you. Senator, you're fresh up helping Cory Booker with his marathon Senate speech yesterday. He broke the records, and you asked him a question to sort of keep him going. That's how it works. Senator, you've called that, I guess, a patriotic exercise. New York Post editorial board, though, calls it a stunt. Cory Booker's sad stunt epitomizes Democrats' empty agenda. What is it, Senator? Patriotic exercise or stunt?
Well, yeah, I believe it was a patriotic exercise. He stood up and he used the power of the Senate, and one of our greatest powers is to be able to speak to the American public, to point out all of the shortcomings and the missteps of the Trump administration, and I think that's our duty. We are, as he pointed out repeatedly, we are one of the checks on presidential power. And if we don't act that way, we are surrendering our constitutional duties in the Senate. I thought he did a magnificent job, and I'm just amazed at the capacity and capability to do that.
Right. What about these editorial boards, including the Post? They're saying pointless imitation filibuster epitomizes Democrats' pathetic incoherence in the wake of the November defeat, Senator. They've got a completely different point of view than you. It was certainly dramatic. I watched it.
All right. No, I think it's, an editorial page is partisan by nature. I think if you go into the editorial pages of the New York Times or to the other papers, you'd get a much different reading. That's expected. But I think what Cory did was first remind us all of our responsibilities as senators and the institution of the Senate to be an effective check on presidential power. And frankly, we have not done that. We have been supine. We have laid down while he has broken laws, literally. And I think he's reminding us of our duties.
Senator, all right, let's go to the polls. We'll leave the editorials alone. We'll go to the polls. New Quinnipiac poll, Senator, has Democrats doing worse than 2 weeks ago. You're at 21% approval rating in Congress. How are you ever going to turn that around? And is that a result of this relentless beating on Trump?
No, quite the contrary. I think that the last poll that I'm paying attention to is the Wisconsin race for the Supreme Court, where Musk went in on behalf of Trump with millions of dollars, which I think is highly questionable in terms of its legality, to try to sway voters, and the Democratic candidate won decisively. And that is a test in a state which previously has gone for Trump, and now they're dramatically rejecting at least his sponsored candidate. So I think that's a much more compelling poll than others.
But that Quinnipiac poll is pretty compelling, Senator. I've got the headline. Democrats in Congress receive lowest approval rating in Quinnipiac poll history, 21%. You can't ignore that. And yesterday's elections also gave 2 wins to Republicans in Florida, Senator. Go ahead, square it all.
They gave 2 wins to Florida, which were very much a concern of the Republican Party. Those are deeply red seats, which Trump took by far greater margins than their candidates yesterday. So it suggests that what they were able to produce last November in Florida is much less than they can do today. And I think, frankly, I've been around for a while. Congress never scores very high in polls. In fact, the proverbial line is, I hate Congress, but I like my congressperson, et cetera. I think that's true.
All right, let's close it to home. I had Joe Paolino on a week ago, and this Joe Paolino, by the way, not that long ago, ran for the top number 2 spot in the party nationally.
Yes.
And he said, my Democrat Party has no leadership. Does that surprise you? No leadership, said Joe Paolino.
No, it doesn't, because frankly, we're in a situation where we're 3 or 4 months from the inauguration. Any president commands the bully pulpit, commands the scene for at least a certain period of time. And, we don't have the likely opponent for the next presidential race yet, and we're trying to organize. So I'm not surprised that he would say it's without leadership. But despite that, again, we seem to have the leadership in Wisconsin, and we did much better than anyone thought in Florida.
Well, Senator, That's kind of a lawyer's answer. You're saying you don't have a titular leader of the party, you don't have a presidential candidate, but he's talking generally in terms of everybody involved, that the party is a mess. You have no leadership. He also suggested a remedy, a la when the party was in this situation with Bill Clinton. You got to turn things around. That's what he's really saying, Senator. Are you surprised at that?
No, I think he's saying that, and that's an example of how we did that. After Mike Dukakis lost the election and George Herbert Walker Bush was president, we were in a situation where we were looking around. And frankly, at that point, Bill Clinton was famous for his long speech at the convention and his saxophone playing. Yet 4 years later, he was president of the United States. So we're early in the game. But Joe's right. We do have to have leadership. We do have to get more focused. And I think, we talked about Corey last night. That's one of those signals that there are people standing up in the Democratic Party and calling the president to order, if you will.
Right. Senator, you're really going after Pete Hegseth and that signal scandal, the call to plan the war that the reporter was invited in on. The critics have suggested that no one was killed. It might have been sloppy, but unlike Afghanistan and the pullout that you've been critical of, it wasn't as bad as that. You want to address that? You've certainly heard these comparisons. Is it apples and oranges, or is it fair, Senator?
It's apples and oranges. We were talking about senior leaders of the United States, including the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, the Director of National Intelligence, chatting on a encrypted but not invulnerable, if you will, a system. In fact, the doctrine in the Defense Department is no one should use signal for any type of sensitive information. This was classified information. They did it, and frankly, had the information been leaked by the reporter, particularly close to the time of the operation, we would have put our pilots at grave risk. This is something that you learn in officer candidate school. And I tried to warn the American people that Mr. Hegseth is not prepared to be the Secretary of Defense, and I think he demonstrated it once again.
What is your aim with this investigation? By the way, it's bipartisan. The Democrat who leads your committee
Yes.
now, you're the ranking minority member on the committee. Apart from finding out how the reporter got in, who invited him in, how it really happened, what is there a lesson here? We know it was sloppy. We know the raids were executed as per plan. What's the end game other than embarrassing the president and the administration?
Well, I hardly think that Roger Wicker, the Republican chairman of the committee, would join me in a letter that's designed to embarrass the president. What it's designed to do, appropriately, is to identify how it happened, what were the mistakes made in terms of security of information, has this happened before, and to ensure that we do not repeat this situation. And again, deliberately this is bipartisan, because what's at risk here is not a partisan issue, it's the lives of our men and women who serve the country.
Senator, I never heard of Signal before this broke into the news. Do you use it? Who uses it? And explain that part to me. I mean that I never heard of this thing.
Signal is an encrypted technology, but it is not so well protected that it can't be penetrated fairly easily by sophisticated national intelligence organizations. And Signal is quite common in Washington. Yes, I use it because the Democratic caucus uses it, but again, we are careful not to talk about any type of classified information on Signal at all. In fact, we try to follow the rules, which means when we're talking on a classified subject, we're in a SCIF, which is a protected area, using government-provided communications, which are protected, extremely well protected.
Senator, if you'll just give me 30 seconds more, I'll let you go. Your take on Elon Musk. He says, we're not cutting Social Security, we're not cutting Medicare or Medicaid. I'm looking for waste, fraud, and abuse. I know you think the opposite. Take 30 seconds or we'll let you go.
Well, here's the critical error with Musk. He's going out and looking at the cost of things. What you have to look at, anyone serious, is the cost and the benefits. So when he eliminates people at the National Nuclear Security Administration simply because he can do it and he can chalk up a few dollars, he forgets that they have to protect our nuclear stock, and what happens? Within 2 or 3 days, they call them back. That is an example of the really sloppy and, I think, counterproductive approach of Musk.
Senator, always good to hear from you. Thanks for joining us. See you when you're back
Thank
home
you,
in
Gene.
Westerly.